So you girls were in his room, like his hotel room?
His wife's
Yes.
not there, but he
Yeah.
invites just the young 19, 20-year-old girls into his room to watch videos that have nudity in them.
And it's devastating to find out that you've been fooled. Sarah is the one that had found a note between Michael Brown and her, and that it was, you know, sexual in nature. And
She asked him to share the text with no one. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast. We're your host Blaise
and Christina.
It's great to be with you today. We've got a incredible interview with Londa Parker. Her background is working with Steve Hill during the Pensacola revival. They broke off and went with Michael Brown, Dr. Michael Brown, known as Dr. Michael Brown now, of Fire School of Ministry and now in the Line of Fire. And they went and worked with Michael Brown for a number of years. She is one of the people that has seen and witnessed some of the things that Michael Brown is currently under investigation for right now. Christina, I know you had some things you wanted to tell people before we get into this interview, just to help people process, because I know there's, is this just gossip, or is this just, why not wait till the end of the investigation? Tell some people your thoughts, because I really liked what you were saying during the interview.
Yes. Okay. Well, one thing is this hits close to home because Dr. Michael Brown is the one who stood up on stage and told us not to gossip, to be quiet, not to talk about IHOP KC. And if we had taken his advice and not done that, there probably wouldn't have ever been an investigation, since it was crowdfunded by all the armchair investigators. And more stories came out because of the stories that came out.
That's right.
Courage begets courage. So I want to say that why this is so personal, I feel like, because of him telling us to be quiet for so long and then him having his own situation, if you will. But also, yes, there's an investigation going on, and a lot of people want to throw accuser of the brethren and gossip around and tell us well, just wait till the investigation's done and then we can, talk about it. But the truth is, we don't know the scope of the investigation, and we don't know what they're going to do with the investigation, because this is a little bit different than the IHOP KC one, because instead of it going through Tikkun, who is a separate ministry who released it, it is up to Dr. Michael Brown's board to release this investigation. If they're going to or not, they say they're going to, we'll see what happens. But either way, I don't want to say I don't trust them, but I don't trust them.
Sure.
And so I think that it's important for the public to know. And also, we know what the investigations after what happened with IHOP KC, it is a summary of everything. So you still don't get the full picture. So I feel like it's important to hear Londa's story, hear, these different people's stories, so we can have even a bigger view. But I was just shocked by all the comparisons, honestly, between Mike Bickle and Dr. Michael Brown. It's the same pattern. It's the same tactics, and it's really disturbing, honestly.
When you started to point that out and started to pull on that thread, I was going, oh my gosh. It's like they have a men's meeting every Friday morning on Zoom to talk about how they're going to get away with this stuff over the last 40 years. It's like, anyway, guys, this one is near and dear to our heart because of how it impacted IHOP KC, but also because it's currently this ministry in the Line of Fire, Dr. Michael Brown, how he's impacted Sarah Monk's life, as well as Ray, who is the husband of the deceased woman that he also was in an inappropriate relationship with. Guys, unpacking this is going to be big today. So dive in, let us know your comments below, share, subscribe, all the stuff, but we appreciate your support. Stick with us to the end of this one. You're really going to want to. All right, take care. Peace. So without further ado, we've got our new and good friend, Londa Parker. Welcome to the show, Londa.
Welcome, Londa.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Awesome. So Londa, we had a great conversation this week. Christina and I just really enjoyed talking to you. So if you could just unpack for all the viewers here who you are, just tell us your background, how you came into, the Brownsville revival and got in contact with Michael Brown, and that way we can kind of unpack this whole story here.
Okay, I would love to. It's really an honor to be here. I guess I'll just start with Brownsville. We moved to Brownsville to Pensacola to go to Brownsville Assembly of God Church in 1997. And We literally moved there over a weekend, which was just crazy. We were 27 years old and had three little boys, all under the age of 5.
My goodness.
And we just moved there, and we moved there on a Saturday. We went to church on Sunday morning. My, I'm sorry to say this now, ex-husband um, talked to somebody at church, and by Monday morning, he had a full-time job working at the Brownsville Revival School of Ministry.
Wow.
So we were immediately just thrown into everything concerning the church. I mean, with the school, the church. I was
How
on the
long had the
intercessory.
revival? How long had the revival been going on by that time?
Um, Probably about, I want to say like a year and a half
Okay.
to 2 years, probably more like a year and a half. And it was incredible. To this day, I have nothing but good to say about it. I'm sure there were mistakes made along the way, but anyone who had, like, I think about it like this: if you ever went to summer camp, if you were in a youth group and you went to summer camp and you just had the best experience of your life, that's what we had, but for several years.
Wow.
And just the presence of God was there. We saw thousands upon thousands of people get saved with real lasting fruit. We saw, like, between like 30, 40 people every Friday night would get baptized. People would get in line at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to get into the service
Wow.
by 6 o'clock. Uh, the service wouldn't end until after midnight, and then you still didn't want it to end. We went to the services were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning.
Wow.
And the children's church was every bit as powerful as the regular church. Uh, there were times I walked into children's church and my son would be laying hands on adults who were getting touched by the Lord. And I cannot say enough good about what happened to us at Brownsville. I ended up working for the evangelist, Steve Hill, and it was just amazing. I don't know how to explain. Um, I think, Blaise, you have had a little bit of this, but just to find yourself with these people that we just had so much admiration for
Mm-hmm.
and truly loved, but to find ourselves being able to know them. As I was thinking about it this morning, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold or allergies or something
You're
today.
fine.
As I was thinking about it this morning, I was thinking about working for Steve Hill and just what a wonderful experience that was for me. And one time he came into the office and he gathered us all together and he was crying. And he said these words to us because revival was so awesome. It's like you almost didn't have to read your Bible or pray because you have so much of anointing going on that you're just full all the time. And he walked in one day and gathered us all together and he said, "This is the most important piece of advice I'm ever going to give all of you." And he said, "Go home, read your Bible, and pray and get to know the Lord for yourself."
Mm.
And he said, "Do not depend on the shallowness of a revival service,"
Wow.
which was crazy because the revival services didn't seem shallow at all. But he was just saying, you can depend on that, but it's not going to be here forever. And so he wasn't trying to set up some type of organization to be the thing for the
Yeah.
whole world. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he felt like people from there would go out and change the world, but he wasn't trying to have the focus on himself, um and he didn't think he would be there forever. And so I remember him saying that and getting kind of scared, like, is this going to end? And not knowing, but it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And so, at about the same time that Steve was getting ready to move away, we got a position somewhere else and we moved away. not for, we were gone for about, I want to say, a year and a half, maybe. And that would have been like the year 2000. And right, I mean, we had been gone a few months, and I got a phone call from my mom, and Steve had already left, and but Mike Brown was still there. The school was still going, Dr. Michael Brown, and he was still the head of the school. And they were going to continue on. They were still having some revival services, and but things had settled down quite a bit, and but they still wanted the school to continue on. And I got this phone call from my mom, and she said, "You are not going to believe what has happened, but Michael Brown has been fired." And I can't tell you the shock that we were in, but it was just something that I never ever dreamt would have happened. Maybe if we were still there and kind of knew what was going on, but it was just so crazy to hear that. And she said he was going to hold a meeting across town and explain what had happened. And so she went to this meeting, and she called us back, and she said, um, he gave this explanation for why he had been fired, which only recently, and I mean within the last couple of months, have I found out that that was a complete farce. Everything the reasons he said he had been fired were not what the truth was.
And what were those
So,
reasons?
um, I think that the reason that he gave was that the uh, Pastor Kilpatrick told him that he had to become ordained by the Assemblies of God, or he would be fired. Now, looking back on that, like, let's say that were the truth. Well, Brownsville was an Assemblies of God church.
Hmm.
And so, if the Assemblies of God wanted someone who was over an Assemblies of God school to be ordained by the Assemblies of God, it would make sense. And but he just said, in this meeting, he just said, that is not what God wanted me to do. And I know that's not what he wanted me to do. And so they fired me.
This episode is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Insurance. We've been helping clients all over the United States with term life, whole life, universal life, and annuities for coming on 8 years now. If you're looking for a way to protect your family, life insurance is probably one of the best ways to do that, and it's not hard to get in place. Work with over 25 insurance carriers, and I can help almost anybody in any situation. There are also ways to do infinite banking concepts, which is basically life insurance with a savings account attached to it. I've got a lot of clients that really like that option. If you're interested, hit me up. Link below, schedule an appointment, and I'd be happy to do a free consultation and see if I can help you out.
So there were really just several layers of reasons of why he was fired. Um, I've heard a couple of different stories recently. They kind of fit together, but I don't want to say the whole thing just in case I'm not exactly right. But
Sure.
I can with confidence say that he was not fired for the reason that he said he was fired. And like I said, even if he had been just being who I am now and more mature, I actually could understand even then. But anyways, so they had this large meeting, and then in that meeting, he announced that the faculty had decided to join him, and that because so many students needed to finish school under him and all this stuff, and God had called him to lead this revolution. He had just written the book, Jesus Revolution, I think is what it's called. And he felt like he was supposed to lead this revolution, and that it wasn't supposed to be handed off to someone else, and that the faculty had decided to come with them, and they were going to work without pay. Like, you just all this stuff. And we were waiting for one particular uh, faculty member to tell us if they were going with him or if they were going to stay at Brownsville or what they were going to do, because we had a lot of respect for this person. And we found out that they were also leaving to go with Michael Brown. And so even though we weren't living there at the time, my mom was, and we all just kind of decided together, well, if that's the case, then we're going. And um, I think he's being honest. He's saying this to so many people. He's probably telling the truth. And so we just decided that's whose side we were on. And when I think back about it now, I'm older, I'm just like, our decisions were made on very immature reasoning, and just I would not do it all over again for
Sure.
sure.
So
But
just for clarity and context for everybody listening, so Steve Hill is the guest preacher at John Kilpatrick's church
yes,
in Florida, right, in Pensacola,
right,
and
right.
revival breaks out.
Hmm.
Most of the revival is not like what we would consider some of the revivals today, where it's just like it was lots of salvations. From what I remember
Yes,
seeing, it was salvation after salvation after salvation
yes,
for years, and
yes.
then Michael Brown, was he a part of Kilpatrick's church at the time, or how did he?
No, no,
Okay,
I think he had gotten there like not too long before we moved there. I think we moved there when the school was beginning the second semester.
okay, and so was he in charge
So
of the school? Is that like did he start the
he,
school? Or?
yes, he became the president of the school. He helped to start the school. He always says that he founded the school, which is another thing that everyone is always just like, no, the school was going to be a school. I mean, so many people had gotten saved and were wanting to go to school, and they needed something for all of these people who had gotten saved to do to get further in ministry. And so, um, it was really the demand, but he did not found that school.
Okay,
Um,
so he came in
so
to the
he
revival
came
with.
in as yeah, he came in as president. Steve was acquainted with him. They both had been mentored by Leonard Ravenhill. And
Okay,
so
interesting.
I'm not sure how he ended up being asked to be the president of the school, but he didn't start the school. He was just the president of the school when it started. Does
Gotcha,
that make
gotcha. So
sense?
he's running the
Okay.
school for how many years before the break, or he's fired?
It had to be like 3.5 years, maybe 3.5, 4 years, right around there. They had one graduating class, and so it was a 2 year school, and then the other class had been through their first semester, and then the school split.
Okay, got it.
And Steve had moved away to Dallas, and he had started a church in Dallas, and so things were just a lot different. um, we were not living there. We ended up moving back to Pensacola, and the just like what had happened before, as soon as we came back, Michael Brown hired my now ex-husband again. He was over the computer department, and then he ended up being also in marketing and part of pastoral care. So we were very involved. If you were like to kind of talk about where we were as far as leadership goes, it would be kind of like mid-management, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
And but we knew, everybody really well, and we were just immediately fully immersed in that, and it was good. I felt like at the very beginning there was a joke made that some people at Brownsville were calling Michael Brown the Pied Piper, and that he was playing a tune that was leading people astray. And it became kind of a joke, and we all laughed about it. But looking back on it, I'm like, it really wasn't very funny, because it really was true. He was talking about this revolution. There was going to be a Jesus revolution. We're the ones who are going to do it. He was going to lead it. He's being called to lead it. That's why he had to start a school. Um,
Okay,
It's exactly what Mike Bickle did whenever he left Metro.
it's true. It's
wow.
it's true.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Interesting. And one of the things he would say, y'all, at the beginning of all this, he would say, and I have the support of some wonderful people, including Mike Bickle, who are blessing this and say I'm doing the right thing. And so that was huge to all of us.
Right.
Yeah.
That carried a lot of weight. And the different people he was naming that supported him. And so, but it felt so, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but just like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be the next wave of the revival. There was the revival and that's done, but now there's going to be revolution. Everything's going to change. And oh my goodness, it was just delusional. Honestly, it was delusional. I mean, it sounded good and it got us fired up, but it was focused on this person was going to lead us,
Yeah.
students, in fact, all of us was going to lead us in a revolution, and we were going to overturn everything and change the whole world, right? Well,
So
were you going to say something?
yeah, no, so it sounds like he bounced and a lot of students and faculty went with him. And you guys ended up going with him, and then he started his school, which was was it Fire School of Ministry. So that was in like 2003, 2002, 2003-ish.
Yeah, I would say that was like, no, it was earlier than that. It would be like at the beginning, somewhere around 2001, because I think I told you before, like 9/11 happened
Oh, okay, yeah.
while we were at Fire. And that's kind of just a landmark for me that makes me remember
Gotcha.
the time period.
Okay, so start from there then. Tell us kind of that part of the story. You guys land there and just kind of break down what you started to see happen. And
Okay.
yeah, keep going.
So we're there, and I mean, there were some good things, but I can honestly tell you that from my heart, something felt a little off to me. But I would just try to push it down. And it was very traumatic because, like, Steve Hill would still come in town and minister at Brownsville some. And, like, I went over there to see him one time and I had to sneak over there.
Oh,
Like, I
wow.
couldn't let anybody know I was going over to Brownsville. And I even, like, somebody told Steve I was there, and I went in the back and talked to everybody. And then I was scared to death that, oh my gosh, I was in the green room talking to these leaders. And what if that gets back to Fire? I mean, ridiculous, just
Yeah.
ridiculous. And it's disturbing. It's not just ridiculous, it's disturbing. The fear that I had such a fear because we had it so drilled into us to not touch God's anointed that I walked around constantly in fear. Like when I would feel like something doesn't feel right to me here, I would immediately rebuke that because I would be so scared that, oh my gosh, what if I get struck down? What if one of my kids gets struck down? What if, I mean,
Wow.
it was, it was just a total fear
Where do
tactic.
you think that was coming from? Was it like was there like a feeling of that you guys were better than Brownsville? Don't talk to folks at Brownsville
I
or
think it's what was taught to us that the people that were above us were the anointed ones, and we're all striving to become as anointed as them, but we're not yet. We haven't made it like they have. And um, if we say anything against them, God's going to get us.
yeah.
Or
And when
if
you
it gets back to them, they're going to call us in and we're going to get lectured or, just constant fear all the time of making a misstep.
Yeah.
Well, just to clarify, to make sure everybody understands, the people above you, that would be Michael Brown. So he's the one that is the anointed one, and he's the one that's telling you that he's the anointed one and telling
Yes.
you, don't mess with
Yes.
the anointed one.
Right. He's going to lead the revolution.
And what's interesting even about that whole thing, two things stuck out just in that portion of your story is number one, you felt like something wasn't right, which is the name of a book by a guy named Wade Mullen about spiritual abuse and abusive tactics in the church. Something's not right. And what's so interesting about it when we feel something's not right, our natural inclination in the charismatic world is to immediately go supernatural and try to rebuke it. But you can't rebuke
Yes.
that feeling that something is not right. And so,
Yes.
but we've all been there. And so I totally get
Yeah.
it. Another thing that stuck out to me that you said was that Michael Brown is saying this, as far as just as the majority of the charismatic movement carries this idea of honor culture, do not touch the Lord's anointed, don't speak against the Lord's anointed. But you look at so many of these guys, and where do they come from? They literally come from a church split where they spoke against the other Lord's anointed,
Yes.
saying that they were the Lord's anointed, not the former guy.
Yes.
And it's like everything is
not
like, well,
true.
I split from this. So you split from Steve Hill and then did what you said you wouldn't do, opened a school across town, and now you're the Lord's anointed now, and nobody can speak against you. So it is a very, very interesting cycle that I see in probably not just charismatic ministry as a whole, but it definitely carries weight because of John Bevere's teaching on undercover, as well as, which is involved in all of this, back to the early 2000s.
Absolutely.
Plus,
Absolutely.
what's the other one? Bethel's Honor Culture. Yeah, that whole book from Bethel. Anyway, just an interesting thought there.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward
absolutely.
to where you guys started to see some things happen with Mike Brown, because obviously people are watching this are going, we know there's an investigation. We know it's happening right now. And Michael Brown is supposed to be not doing any ministry right now. He continues to kind of post on Facebook and kind of stay out there. But you tell us what you saw as an eyewitness to some things leading up to what everybody's reporting now.
I think it's very important to note that the rules as far as boy-girl stuff with the students was so over the top with purity culture. And I'm all about purity and being pure before the Lord. And I think it's important. But this was so over the top that the rules were just getting more and more and
Give us an
more.
example.
Boys and girls weren't supposed to have lunch by themselves together. They were not, a married couple, if they were students, were not allowed to hold hands in public.
See, that's weird.
Even if they were married? Yeah, that's weird.
Even if they were married. The clothing just got to be, the rules for clothing got to be so ridiculous that I can't even tell you. Girls could not wear anything that showed that they were a girl. And for some girls, that's impossible.
Yeah, that's hard to do sometimes.
You know, and it was like, and girls could not wear cargo pants because
Wait.
that was masculine, and they might be giving off masculine vibes if they wore cargo pants. And
Wow.
I mean, the list just was getting more and more and more, and it was just like so overwhelming as far as those rules and the purity culture. And just, you can't, they, of course, they couldn't date the first semester, and then they needed to date in groups, and then, I mean, it just goes on and on and
Sure.
on. And so that should be the standard that our leaders are also keeping. If there is a standard being set, okay, you know. And so I began to notice things, and I had worked for Steve Hill, who had some single girls working for him. He would never be alone with a single girl. His door on his office was glass so that he could be seen at all times. He didn't ever want to be hidden. I met with him one on one. I mean, there's a glass door. The door was open. His assistant's right outside the door. Like everything was just so good and natural and careful. But I was used to that environment, and the way that the rules were at Fire were even so much more strict that I figured that's what the leaders would adhere to. And so there was a young girl, and Michael Brown actually had several younger single girls working as interns for him. Um, and so this one particular girl, I just started to notice like maybe she was kind of like a favorite. Um, I wasn't sure, but one day I got to church early, and it's the church that we were using at the time was a large building, and he was sitting up on the platform, and this girl who was about 19, 20 at the time, he was, I think, older than 40. He was in his 40s. I'm trying to think, compare our ages right now. He had to be in his 40s. And so she was sitting up on the platform with him in a chair right next to him. And not, I know some people don't understand churches that are like this, but not just anyone could just go up on the platform. Like it's a big deal to go up on the platform, which now I just hate so many words now. Like I hate the word platform. I just hate that word. Platform. And I hate the word, like the school made me hate the word grad. I'm like, if I hear the word grad one more time. So anyway, this girl was sitting up there on the platform next to him, and they were sitting so close that their arms and legs were touching. And they were bent over looking at some pictures, and they were just laughing together, and it just looked intimate. Like they it's not like they were doing something wrong, but it's just something that you wouldn't see there, and something that didn't set right with me. And at the time, what I thought was like, if I walked in the room and that was my husband,
Yeah,
I would be,
exactly.
I would be kind of going, what was that about? And that didn't look right. And maybe you shouldn't be sitting that close.
Yeah,
That's kind of
absolutely.
the my thought process. And because it was Michael Brown, it was even more. So it was like, that's weird. And then I just immediately am like rebuking myself. Oh my gosh, Londa, you're just thinking
Wow.
things, and you shouldn't be. He is so pure. That man is so pure. He has the Bible memorized. I mean, just the things I would think.
Hmm.
And oh, that was another thing recently. Recently I heard him say that he never said he had the Bible memorized. That's so ridiculous. We heard about him having the Bible memorized all the time. And not only that, memorized in Hebrew. So, and Greek. So I was just like, but how could I think this about a man who has the Bible memorized? I mean, who could do something like that anyway if you have the Bible memorized? And it was just, and he's Jewish, and I mean, I would just beat myself up for thinking anything. Well, then, um, and I'll say during this time, we rarely, rarely saw his wife at church. And if she was at church, she sat in the back and did not interact
You're
with
talking about
anyone.
Sundays, Sunday morning church, like regular church.
Yeah, we didn't have Sunday morning church. I think we had Saturday night church, but yeah.
Okay.
And
And he was
but that's
the basically the leader of the school, and he was the pastor of the new church.
um well, we were so revolutionary that we didn't have pastors.
Of course, of
We
course.
had a group of leaders, and they were all supposed to be like on a level playing field.
Hmm.
They weren't, but that's what it was supposed to be.
Sure.
So it was, we're so revolutionary. We're not having a pastor. Okay.
Yeah.
Not one person's going to get the attention, just a certain little group of people.
Sure.
And, and so, what ended up happening was I saw a couple of other things like that. Well, we went to the call in Boston, which happened like 2 weeks after 9/11. So when we went to the call in Boston, the only people that were on the streets, like in New York City, were people who were headed to go help where the towers had collapsed. And when we got to Boston, it was just empty except for the people there that were there to pray. And so you can imagine it was people like Mike Bickle and Lou Engle and,
Yeah.
that group of people. It's so, things are so intertwined, you guys.
Yeah.
But so at the call, we at the time had a student that lived with us that was a female, and she was also part of that little internship group. And so she stayed with her friends in their hotel room. And when we left the call, she told me, she was like, the most interesting thing happened. She said, me and who we all now know as Sarah, she's fine with us using her name, Sarah, and a few other girls were invited to Dr. Brown's room um, to watch videos. And so she said, we went in there and she said, he had us watching Woodstock videos to show us what revolution looks like. And the videos had nudity and stuff in them. And it was just like us girls and him.
Okay.
And she,
Sorry,
okay, go
I just
ahead.
want to make sure. I just want to make sure I understand everything. So he's there. He has his own hotel room because his wife's not there. His wife's not there, but he invites just the young 19, 20-year-old girls into his room to watch videos that have nudity in them.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
That is so weird. That's
To show them what revolution looks like.
But what do you mean? Because y'all are trying to start a revolution. So what do you
Against
mean?
against
Show them what
that.
revolution looks like. Show them what we're
Yeah,
about
he's
to do.
trying
Show them what's about to happen.
yeah,
I don't.
I don't know, trying to show them what it looks like when a whole culture gets involved and stuff. He would refer to Woodstock and to like Marxism and like that's not a good thing. That's not how we want to be, but it's just a good example of
But this is
when
what
a
it
whole
looks like.
culture, yeah, we want a whole culture to be
Yeah.
taken over. So I'm going to show you guys this video.
Okay. And how do you know how many girls were in that room with him?
I do not, probably about five,
Okay,
probably
so
something like
and they
about
were
five.
all around the same age, like young. And whenever she was telling you, was she telling you like, "This is so interesting. This is what we're gonna do, a revolution," or was she like a little weirded out, or
No,
she
she
didn't know
was
what to think?
telling me, and she was just telling me, and then I was like, wait a second. So you girls were in his room, like his hotel room? And she said, yes. And I said, and was his wife there? And she said, no. And I said, did you feel funny about that? And she said, well, I thought it was kind of weird at first, but then I was like, well, it's Dr. Brown and blah, blah. But then she said, but the video did kind of bother me because that seems like stuff like we weren't, students were not allowed to go see PG movies.
Yeah.
There were students who were disciplined who got caught seeing The Matrix, which was R rated. Like, but they can go in his room and watch naked women dancing around high on drugs. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and one of them was the girl, Sarah. So that did for sure did not sit right with
Of
me.
course.
And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to end up addressing this, but things are just like we're here for this prayer thing after 9/11 happened. We can see the smoke rising, literally see the smoke rising from those buildings. And they're up in Michael Brown's hotel room watching Woodstock videos. It
Yeah.
was just later I found out that his brother-in-law, his wife's brother, was killed in the Twin Towers. It was just so strange.
Yeah, and just for everybody for context and like I think so. So even in this conversation and what's going on in the church at large right now, I think there's so many people that have such a hard time hearing these stories because they think, oh, this is gossip, or this is spreading rumors, or this is this, that, or the other. But here's the issue. Like somebody at the level of Dr. Brown, of Michael Brown, okay, somebody at his level of influence in the body of Christ, to know that, like, I'm 42. We've been married 10 years. If I was leading a ministry, and for years I led an insurance agency, we worked together to do that, but we did the majority of our stuff together. But if I was ever traveling like for an insurance thing and I had girls, like 4 or 5 girls in my room, hey, I'm going to show you all a video on how we're going to influence the insurance industry. Oh, and by the way, it's from Woodstock, 1969, and this is what real revolution looks like. Oh, and look at all these naked people. Like, you'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
That would not go well.
it would be so strange.
So strange.
First of all, just to have women in my room. Not only that, but to go that extra step to, and this is the deal with Michael Brown right now, is he is saying that everything that happened between he and Sarah, and mentioning the things that happened between he and Ray's wife, who's passed away, the way that he's speaking of all these things is a, quote, lack of judgment. He doesn't say he sinned. He doesn't say he crossed sexual lines in any way, shape, or form. But what we're about to get into is the corroborating evidence of multiple witnesses of what he did in physical contact with someone half his age who was under his leadership. So if that's not enough to point to all these, like, we have to look at this stuff with eyes wide open, and we can't not just sit here and call it gossip. I mean, Londa, you're not sitting here going, oh, I just want to bury Dr. Brown, or it's like, no.
I hated this. I
Yeah.
hated what was happening. Like I can talk about it now. I'm 56 years old. I was 30-ish at the time, and it is still devastating to me. Like, you do not want to find this out about the people that you love and admire, and it's devastating to find out that you've been fooled. And you definitely, like, at the time that these things were happening, I was telling no one. I didn't even tell the person I was married to. I did not even let the words be uttered out of my mouth that I was being bothered about some of this stuff. Sorry, I'm getting choked up. And so whenever we got back, and at the time too, like later when I found out that his wife's brother had been killed in 9/11, and I'm like, but 2 weeks later, he is in a hotel room with these young girls showing them Woodstock. Just went along to me with just the weirdness of what was happening at the time.
Yeah.
And so we got back from that, and I was just sick over knowing about the hotel room thing. And I don't know what the time period was, but I just would notice little things like that. Like I would walk in, and he and Sarah would be in a room by themselves and just always together. And then one day we were at a chapel service for the school, which was a much smaller room than the sanctuary where we had church services. And she was on the front row, and I was sitting directly behind her. And we were standing up during worship, and I looked down, and on the pew in front of me was a love note that she had written to Michael Brown. And it was very obviously a love note because it was folded. It did have dad in parentheses, but then it said Mike. And then it had red hearts drawn all over it, like someone young would do when writing a love note. And it was just, again, it was just one of those things that just struck my heart. Like, I can't, and I would think, why am I seeing this? Like, what, why do I keep seeing this? And it disturbed me so much that I went home. I emailed Michael Brown, and I told him the best way I could explain it was I would go home after these things, after almost every church service, and I would cry out to God. I would get by myself and I would literally weep and beg God that Mike Brown would not fall into temptation, that God would keep him, that God would stop this attack, because I saw it as an attack against him. And so I emailed him and I told him, I feel like that there's an attack and that you really need to be on guard and keep good boundaries up. And I said basically everything without saying I'm worried about a girl. And
Mm-hmm.
he texted me back and he said, thank you for that, or not text, emailed me back and said, thank you for that, Londa. Um, Keith Collins, and that name is important. So I'm saying that name on purpose. Keith Collins just sent me a very similar email saying the same thing. So I really appreciate. Now, he keeps such good records, you guys, that all of these years later, when I had contact with him last year, he was able to pull up that message that I sent him
Wow.
all the way back in 2003.
Wow.
So, yeah, I found that very interesting. Oh, yes, I just found that message. You were so encouraging, blah, blah, blah. So, um, anyways, uh, I told him that I still had not told my current husband. I had not told him any of that because I didn't want to gossip, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, then I was at another chapel service, and whenever chapel would be over, all the students would be in the hallway because they would be going to different classes and everything. Well, I came out, and Darla Collins, who is Keith Collins' wife, Keith Collins was a faculty member, and I think was part of pastoral care, if I'm remembering right. Anyway, um, his uh, wife was coming out of Dr. Brown's office, and she was running down the hallway just with the most disturbed look on her face. I'll never forget it because I literally locked eyes with her and I could tell she was like, don't even, like, I knew not to stop her and ask her what was wrong. And then I looked and Michael Brown was chasing her down the hallway. And I thought, what on earth is going on? And did he try something with her? I mean, it was just weird. Like, I just
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, my brain was just going off. What is going on? And so, finally, that's what kind of sent me over the edge. Whenever my ex-husband, I know I keep calling him my ex-husband because that's what
Sure.
he is, but whenever he um, showed up at home that evening, I finally told him. I said, I can't keep this to myself anymore. This is eating me alive. I can't stop thinking about it. I'm worried about this. I told him about it, and those interns also worked with him because of what his job was in marketing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I had kind of kept that from him, just like, I don't know why really. I guess because he was kind of like just in the middle of all of that. But I told him and he was like, "Oh, really?" And that's weird, but um so I was going somewhere that night. I mean, I had just told him, and I was going, I think, to my mom's or something. But anyway, I went somewhere, and we had neighbors that were also part of the staff at the school, and they came over to our house while I was gone, this husband and wife, and they asked him if he had felt anything about this one student. Her name was Sarah. And his eyes, he said his eyes just got big and he was like, I am not kidding you. Londa just brought this up to me not 10 minutes before you guys came to my house.
Wow.
And they said, well, um, we had some like just alarm about some things we've seen with them. And then they said, and then we found out that he was holding hands with her on a ministry trip. And so when I got home and he told me that, I was literally sick. It wasn't, I mean, one of the things that's been said about me is I was just a disgruntled member of the church, because
Sure.
during that time, a lot of us were working without pay because it wasn't doing well financially. We were getting day-old bread from some shop that would drop their bagels off at the school.
We did
And
that
we
at
were
IHOP
literally,
KC too.
oh
I
my
remember
gosh,
those days.
maybe that's where the idea came from.
Probably
and,
did.
and talking about sacrificing, and we would be like, we need to pay our electric bill, and people on food stamps bought our groceries. We couldn't qualify for food stamps because on paper we were supposed to be making a salary, but we weren't. So later I found out that my mom was tithing and giving an offering to the church and designating it to us. And that's how we were even getting any money. And she wasn't telling me. So I didn't even know that until recently, like literally within the past couple of months have I found that out. And so it was just crazy. So when I found out that he was holding her hand, for me, everything that I had thought, I was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like because I was like, I know that married couples who are students are not allowed to hold hands. But he is holding her hand on a ministry trip. And it was so devastating. I can't even explain the devastation I felt finding that out. I didn't feel like, oh, I was right. See, I felt like, no. And we have been going without, and we left a pastor, John Kilpatrick, that I adored. We left that church. What have we been doing? And I had been miserable for several months because I'd been keeping all this inside. And to find that out. And so those people who came to our house said, these couple of guys are going to go and confront him about this. And one of them had seen him alone in a car with her at Walmart. Darla Collins, who is the one I saw running down the hallway, she had been in his office and seen Sarah was sitting in Dr. Brown's chair and he was massaging her back. And that's the day that I saw Darla run out of the office.
So she had
just
walked.
saw it.
Yeah,
she walked in, and then she just turns around and starts booking it. Then he's chasing her, trying to be
chasing her.
Oh, it's not what you think. Like, don't.
Yes.
She just had a crick in her neck.
She's a daughter to me. She's a daughter to me. She's a daughter to me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I witnessed that. It's so weird, the places when I think about where I ended up, and it was just so strange because you're talking about a place that there really were hundreds and hundreds of people. So,
well, that's what I was going to say is that you have to find, and I think there are many people out there, there's select, well, maybe I'll say it like this, a select few in every handful of groups that feel like you felt. And I just want your story to validate for them, because I hear this in comment sections sometimes as I look at what's going on throughout the body of Christ, and, podcasters and journalists, and there's only so much you can cover, and so sometimes people feel like, oh my gosh, only the famous people get covered, the famous situations. And it's not really just that, but it's like the reality is that these are supposed to be examples to the body of Christ so that people can find out how to not do certain things, right? And also how to do certain things. So like for you, it's almost like you were gaslighting yourself. Like you
I
would see
was.
something, you were like, I rebuke that thought, Londa. How dare you think such a bad thing about such a perfect man of God, you know? And it's like, reality is that's the exact same thing that people like Elizabeth Herder thought about Mike Bickle when they would see things. It's like what many have thought about different people, and probably people thought that about Ravi Zacharias when they were seeing things. And the truth is that everybody's got to realize that you can trust your own eyes. You know, you can trust your own ears, like what you saw and what you heard. And yeah, it's just, and you have to, in some ways, see God at work in exposing these men through somebody like yourself. When you go, I don't know if what I'm seeing is true, and who am I to do anything? Well, who are you not to do anything, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I just want to point that out.
I can't say, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I haven't always had a pure heart, but I can tell you in that moment, my heart was pure. The last thing I wanted to do is gossip. The last thing I wanted was to even know about this. Like, I hated being in that position of knowing. And it was, I didn't have any morsel of, ooh, guess what? I have something good to tell you. It just was like, that's not what this situation was, and it's been portrayed as that. And I don't like that, because I know these people very well who are speaking out. And why do people think it takes us so long? Because it's a hard thing to do. It's not something that you want to do, and you want to see these people repent without having to do this. And so, it's such a hard situation. Well, we decided, um, they confronted him. Those men went and confronted him. He basically ended up making them feel guilty for confronting him, to the point that they were repenting to him.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
we forgive you, and please forgive us. We believe you, brother. She's like a daughter, and, came to our house. She really is just like a daughter to him. That's what's going on here. And I was like, no, she is not. And I was hot by then. I was like, he he has a daughter that goes to this church who's a grown woman. I haven't ever seen him hold her hand. I haven't ever even seen him hold his own wife's hand. But he's holding this 20-year-old's hand on a ministry trip? No. No, I was just, and I was like, that's it. We're leaving. Like, we're leaving. I cannot even go back to a service there. I'm going to go back over to Brownsville. I'm going to apologize to John Kilpatrick. You, to my ex-husband, you are going to go to Texas where we know people. You're going to get a job, and we are getting out of this. Like, we made a horrible mistake. We have been deceived, and we're out. And so he did. He left to go get a job, and I sent the Browns an email, and I cannot for the life of me remember if he had contacted me first or I sent him something. I can't remember, but I just know I sent him a message, and I said, we are going to leave, and I know some of the things that happen. I have not had the fruit of the Spirit in my life ever since we got here. I have not had joy. I've not had peace. We're not being able to feed our family. Like, we have three little boys. I can't afford clothes for them. It was just like, I just let it all out. And then I said, and then to have this on top of it, I'm sorry, but that's what we're doing. So, he sent me a message back, and he said, Nancy, which is his wife, Nancy and I would like to meet with you. And I said, well, I'll come and meet with you, but can I bring my mom? Because I don't want to come by myself. And he was okay with that. So my mom came, and he started off the conversation by just saying, what do you think you know? Well, I was so young. Now looking back on it, I would be like, I know, and you need to tell me.
Right.
Because
Right.
he wanted to know how much
Yep.
Right.
That's what
I
these
knew.
guys
Exactly.
do.
And so I told him, I was like, I know you held her hand, I know you rubbed her back, and This is what he said to me. He looked at me in my eyes and he said, I never did those things. And he went like this. He went, it never happened. Never happened like that. And I was like, I feel crazy. Like,
Yes.
are you saying none of it happened?
Oh my gosh.
Like, none of it? And he said, none of it. Never happened. It's gossip. It's the people who are saying that are in sin. It never happened. And I said, I was just going like this while he said it. Just, am I hearing this? And then he said,
So the whole
you
thing
believe me?
when Colin's wife ran out of there, chased him down, he didn't even admit to that.
No, he said it did not, I was not rubbing her back. I
My
said, but
goodness.
Darla saw you rubbing her back. And he said, that never happened.
And then the
Never
whole
happened.
hand holding thing, just for people who maybe haven't followed along everything. So there were multiple witnesses who saw him holding her hand and who
Yeah.
he held up her hand and was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm doing this as a father daughter relationship. Like it was very public, and that was part of his
Right.
excuse for doing it, was like,
Right.
oh, we're doing this in a public setting, like it's fine, it's good, this is a father daughter thing. So there were multiple people who saw them holding
Yeah.
hands, right?
That's right. And he was adamant. I mean, just never happened. And this was so uncomfortable, you guys, because his wife is sitting right there,
Yeah.
like, and he's getting mad at me. Like his face was turning red, his leg was shaking.
Oh yeah,
Like,
because he had frankly denied everything to his wife. This is probably their first
right.
interaction about these things. He probably denied everything, and then he's like, "You need to go with this story, or you're hurting my marriage." Basically,
And to these men, he had been able to convince those men
that he admitted to
that he
part of
was
it.
telling the truth. And so he was mad at me because I wasn't believing him. And so I was shaking my head no at him like this. And then he says to me, well, you don't believe me, right? You don't believe me. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. I don't believe you. And he said, well, you sent me a letter saying that you have the fruit of the Spirit in your life again. And love is one of the fruits of the Spirit. And the Bible says that love believes all things, and you don't believe me, so you don't have the fruit of the Spirit.
I can't laugh at that, but it is
But it's
hilarious.
true.
Oh my
But
gosh.
yes. And I just looked at him dead in the eyes and I said, love doesn't believe a lie. That's not what that
Good.
scripture is saying. And I said this to y'all last time, but I was literally like, he has the Bible memorized. Everybody calls him a theologian. And I'm having to tell him love doesn't believe a lie. I'm telling him what the scripture means. I was like, this is the weirdest scenario that I could be in. But I said that. And then his wife looks at us and she's like, well, just like you two. She said, this just like you two. And she said, you're mother and daughter, and you're affectionate with each other during church services. You're affectionate. What if 10 different people came to us and said that they thought that y'all were lesbians?
Oh my gosh.
That is so, so, so ridiculous. I can't. There's no way that you can compare an actual mother-daughter relationship with a 40-something-year-old man and his
20-year-old
pretend
intern.
daughter that's 19, 20 years old sitting on his lap. Like there's that comparison is ridiculous.
Well, I feel bad. I feel
Ridiculous.
bad for her because he clearly gaslit her into oblivion.
The fact that she even defended him that
Yeah.
way, saying to
Yeah.
you, like, that is nuts.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is so
And,
wild.
and by the way, I never sat on my mom's lap and kissed her on the cheek
Yeah.
during a service.
Yeah.
That
It's
was-
wild.
Like,
It's wild.
even
or
just to,
held hands, or
of
any
course,
of the things.
of course.
Any of the things.
But that's their defense. That's their automatic go-to is just like,
It's pretty unbelievable. So you walk out of that meeting.
Weird. So weird.
He convinced his wife that everything. So what's crazy
That's the
about this?
daughter.
Well,
Yeah.
what's crazy about this is that he's denying everything to you point blank right in there in front of his wife. There was no hand holding. There was no back rubbing. Like all the things that were seen that he had been seen doing. He convinced his wife, or he's telling you that it didn't happen at all. Then she's looking over and saying, well, fine, you guys are affectionate. So she doesn't even believe it. I guarantee you she saw some of it, most likely.
Yes.
But
yeah.
anyway, it's just kind of crazy that he's denying it, like literally lying to you to your face in front of his wife. And then she's like, kind of like, well, you guys are affectionate. You're affectionate with your mom. It's like, Sarah was not his daughter. He was not Sarah's dad. He was clearly, for context for everybody listening again, Brown was 40, 41, 42. She was like 19 or 20, and he's holding her hand. He was giving her back rubs, shoulder rubs, and he was getting her to kiss him on the cheek, and then eventually to kiss him on the mouth, which we know that now, and even worse. So
I have a quick question for
He
you.
held hands with her. He held hands with her in the back of his own vehicle while his wife was driving around Manhattan.
Explain that to me. They were sitting in the back.
I don't know I can't remember if Sarah said he was in the back or the front, but somehow he was holding her hand
he was
while his
in
wife
the
was
front.
driving.
She was in the back,
Yeah.
and he reached
And
back and held her hand.
her hand while his wife was driving them around Manhattan
That's so messed
without
up.
her being able to see.
That's so
Yes.
messed up. It's gross.
So there
And
was
he would
so
call
much.
that father-daughter.
Yeah.
Secretly holding hands
Yeah.
with a girl that's sitting in the back.
And I'm sure she has told y'all, and this is public knowledge, but he held her hand many times, and that one time that the other students saw it was the only time he did it in public. And that's important because he says, and you can actually see this in messages that he sent me, it's on the Royce report, but he said to me that he has a hard time believing that he told me that he never held her hand because he purposely held her hand in public so that there wouldn't be any secrecy to it.
Yeah.
So he's now denying that he even told me that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
It's just
So Londa, you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Because I think this is later on. This isn't until like 2023.
It is much later on, yeah.
But I want to ask one question about this same time frame.
Yeah.
So whenever in that meeting or any time before that, did you ever bring up the thing about the hotel with all the girls and watching? No, okay. So that's never been brought up.
no, I never.
Just
No,
curious.
not until recently. I brought it up because the hand holding it just blew my mind. Like it's almost like I forgot about the hotel room for a little while, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, totally. Yeah.
So, years go by and I'm not really thinking about it anymore. Life goes on. A lot of life happened to me. And then Chris Bennett contacted me, and Chris Bennett was the student that saw them holding hands, and he had confronted him about it way back when it first happened. He confronted him, and I did not realize that. So Chris had now grown up, and he's married, and he's got kids of his own, and he starts thinking about it, and he's like, he talks to his wife about it. What do you think about this scenario? And she's like, what? Absolutely not. You better not be holding hands with some girl in a car. And so Chris decided to contact Sarah, and he asked her questions about it and if anything else had ever happened. And she told him, she was honest with him. And then Chris contacted Michael Brown and ended up with Keith Collins going to see Michael Brown, confronting him again, where apparently he admitted to the things that Chris knew about at that moment, which is just such a pattern, and, repented to him, but still maintained that while
It
it was
was not
stupid,
impure, is
it
what he's saying.
right, it was not impure. She was a daughter to me, on and on.
Yeah.
And so Chris informed me of that, and then Chris said, and also he just said, because you were such an integral part of that, he said, I also need to let you know that he was also involved with someone at Brownsville, a woman from Brownsville, is what he said. Not at Brownsville, but a woman from Brownsville. And he didn't tell me who she was at the time, but he said that Sarah is the one that had found a note between Michael Brown and her, and that it was, you know, sexual in nature, and um, that, which is just bizarre. And so I was finding out all these years later, not only, yeah, he did those things with Sarah
But he
and
did
more,
more.
there was more. And Chris told me, I'm not going to tell you what the more is because I need to keep Sarah's confidence. And so I
Right.
didn't know what the more, I just knew it was more than holding hands. And then I knew about the other woman. And so I just let it go. I figured they're taking care of it. I had a lot going on in life by now. Um, and I mean, now I'm remarried. We have 6 kids between us, and I have 12 grandkids. So I'm busy.
Yeah.
And so, so what ended up happening is the IHOP scandal. And when that thing broke, and I got on YouTube and I saw Michael Brown standing up at IHOP and telling people they needed to be quiet, don't talk about it on social media, that, I can't remember everything he said about it, but my mind was blowing up that he would have the gall to stand up there and tell other people what to do and to call for a third party investigation. That really, like, I had never even heard of a third party investigation for a church, for one thing. He's the first person I ever heard say it, but I was like, he's calling that for someone else?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote him immediately. I just got online and sent him a message on Messenger, and I told him I had a real problem with this. All of this can be read on the Royce report. I think you guys have it also, but I just said, I have a real problem with you speaking up about this specific thing. Now that, and by now I knew who the woman was that he had
Mm-hmm.
become involved with. I knew more details about that.
Not just Sarah,
And
but you knew
not
about the
just
woman
Sarah,
who he was
I knew the
having.
other woman.
Context
Mm-hmm.
is he was having an over the phone sexual relationship that he was
Mm-hmm.
initiating with this woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I think it's
Yeah.
worth noting too. I feel like one of the craziest things is that he was talking to this woman and telling her not to have sex with her husband. So he came between
Yes.
this marriage, and it wasn't just
Yes.
somebody in their church. It wasn't just somebody that he like had
That's
authority over,
right.
but it was also a friend. It was somebody that they
That's
like went
right.
on double dates with. Like
Mm-hmm.
from everything that I've read, this was a
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
He literally
And
told
a
a friend's
very, yeah.
wife not to sleep with her
And
husband.
also
And
told
begged her to meet him.
Right.
that's what I was going to
Begged her
say.
He
to
I
meet
didn't
wanted
him.
it to be in person. They had a
phone
phone
relationship
relationship, and he wanted to see her in person,
and she wouldn't do it.
wouldn't do it. If she had,
And
like, who knows?
Right.
and he was at their house so much, you guys. He was at their house so much that their kids started calling him Bob, like from the movie What About Bob? If you've ever seen that, because he was at
I've
their
never
house so
seen it.
much
You
that,
have to tell me what that means.
oh, you've got to watch it. And
Yeah, I've
you'll
seen it.
get
I've
it. But
seen it.
they were just like, why is he
He's
always
always
here?
there.
And
He's
Oh,
Bill Murray, right? So he just shows up with the
yeah,
family all the time.
always
Yeah.
there. And the kids
that's
were like, why
funny.
is he always here?
That's
And the
it's leave it
husband
leave
act,
it to kids to like be honest about these spiritual leaders that think they're all great and stuff. They're like, why is that guy always here? Like the
yeah.
kids. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and as the dad worked out of town, he even picked the kids up at school sometimes.
Mm.
So
it is
was
this
Michael Brown picks
Yeah.
up the kids at school.
Yeah. It is the same type of thing.
But the leader of our revolution.
Yeah. It is
All
the
of
same
us
type
are
of
working
thing.
our heinies off.
You get into a family, you groom the entire family because you're going after that one person, and that's what he did. And he was going after this woman, and like, she's with the Lord now, but I commend her bravery for standing and saying, no, I'm not going to meet you. No, I'm not going to do that. And because the fact is, he pressed hard to get her to that point of even talking that way to him.
Right.
And I know that she probably hated herself for that. She probably repented 1,000 times over. And clearly she talked to her husband about it, and they were like, we're out of here. Right? That's basically what happened. They bounced from the church, and then when the story came out, Brown misrepresented the truth of the matter, and Ray stood up and said, actually, no, I'm going to speak on behalf of my deceased wife, and I'm going to tell the truth, which that statement was powerful. And
Ray went into Michael Brown's office at the School of Ministry. He walked in and confronted him and said, stay away from my wife.
It's a good man.
So for him to call it a soul tie or use this,
it's a total joke
jargon. Mm-hmm. It's a total joke. I was very close to that woman. She was a very good friend of mine. Her loss was horrible, and I saw her about 1 or 2 months before she passed away. I had no idea she was even sick, and we just had the best conversation. And so in that message I sent to Mike Brown, I said, I know you were involved with a woman from Brownsville. She was my friend, so I'm not even going to discuss her with you since she's not with us anymore. And I said, but I know that there was more with Sarah. And then I just ended what I said with, there should have been a third-party investigation. And he came back and said, if you would like to speak with Nancy and I about this, we'd be glad to talk to you. I didn't answer because I was like, I've already spoken with you and Nancy. No,
and clearly you don't even remember what was said.
Yeah. And so then he just starts sending me message after message and trying to explain himself. To be clear, there didn't need to be a third-party investigation because nothing sexual, nothing blah, blah, blah was ever done. Like, just went on this rant about all of it. And at the time, because I did not know yet that he had kissed her on the mouth. I didn't know like any of those things. And he said, and because I said, I know that there was more than hand holding. He said, if there was anything more, it was just more of the same. So even once again, he convinced me that, okay, he's telling me the truth about this now. Mm-hmm. I still didn't believe that he was like a father to her at all, but I just said, I believe you're telling me the truth as far as like what you did and didn't do. And which now it makes me so mad that he said that to me and that
he's really good at convincing people.
He's very, very good. And then he left me a voice message, which I sent you guys, and I have no problem with you sharing it.
Okay with us playing that?
I'm absolutely okay.
So this was when was this that he sent this to you?
This was I guess I would say maybe the end of 2023.
Okay.
Like it would be like
when you're initially confronting him because he's on stage at IHOP and all that. And so
after IHOP, yeah.
And so for context to this, Chris Bennett had confronted Mike Brown, and Mike basically says
told me about it.
And had told you about it. And so then Mike comes back with trying to throw Chris under the bus. So I'm just going to play this and then let you provide more context afterward. But let's just let everyone listen.
Hey, Londa, just so you can hear my voice, blessings and grace to you. And again, thank you for reaching out personally and sharing everything. It means a lot to me. And I walk in such fear of the Lord and wanting to honor him with every fiber of my being, especially when I'm called into situations like this as a father and a leader. You know, I get so low before the Lord, but I have to do what he calls me to do. The one thing, I just wanted you to have this in a voice message rather than in writing. few years back when Chris sat with me and Keith and read texts that Sarah had sent to him when he reached out to her, and she used the words explicitly, nothing sexual or romantic. She asked him to share the text with no one. Of course, you were a friend of Sarah's and all that, but she would be mortified if she knew that people were talking about things or alleging anything, etc. So, that was the one thing that concerned me, is just, Sarah and her own life, etc., being wrongly tarnished or something like that. So, blessings and grace to you again. Just wanted you to hear my voice, and maybe one day, Nancy and I'll get to meet your husband. Okay, God bless.
Okay, so first and foremost, he starts with, I'm dealing with the IHOP situation under the fear of the Lord. Okay, and then he moves on to say, my biggest concern is that is for Sarah.
Sarah would be mortified.
Sarah would
Actually,
be mortified.
He's mortified.
Yeah, I can hear his voice shaking.
Mortified.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So provide some context for that. Like, Chris clearly contacted you, but you said, well, he didn't. Well, yeah, just give us some context. What was your response to him?
My answer to him was, well, Chris didn't share the emails with me. He didn't break any confidence. He just said that more had happened. And I said he did not read her. He did not read it to me. And guess what, you guys? Years later, as I'm talking to Sarah, she said that she had never told him not to share those texts.
So he just made that up.
So
he just made it up.
He's making that up. Yeah. She
on the
never,
spot.
Never said that. And
oh my gosh.
So yeah, there's just
this guy's dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at this point, it's like when I hear him say something about her, I just almost assume the opposite is true. Recently, he's told people that Sarah saw a psychiatrist and that she all of a sudden had memories that came up, and that's why she's saying more happened.
Is any of that true?
Sarah has remembered all of this from day one. Sarah fled fire. If Sarah had not found that note from that
woman
Michael Brown had written about that woman, she would have stayed at fire, and I have no doubt things would have gone much further. But when Sarah found that, she realized he is doing the same thing.
Exactly. That's the thing. The same way.
And that's what caused her to leave. Mm-hmm. Like, she was not, one of the things she has told me, and I love saying this publicly, is that she was not attracted to him. She really was thinking of him like in a fatherly way and thinking, this must be, like, this is affectionate. This is what he's doing. Like, that's what she would tell herself. This is a godly man, even though somewhere in there she was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
He wants me to kiss him on the mouth when I leave the office.
Yeah,
this is strange.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when he told her to call him dad, and he, in the message that he sent me, he said, she called me Pop. And Sarah said to me, I never called him Pop. I called him Dad. And she said, I remember the moment, I remember where I was standing, and it was in front of other people. As he was walking out his office one day, he stuck his head around the corner and he was like, oh, by the way, you can call me Dad from now on. And she said she was kind of like, okay.
Well, I'm not making assumptions here, but I'm just going to say that he might have his memories mixed up with somebody else that he's done this to.
Yeah.
Because if he's throwing around all these things, well, no, I told her she could call me Pop. It's probably a different one. Mike Brown. It's probably a different one. And that's not rude of me to say. I'll just say this to the entire charismatic body of Christ that's looked up to this man, that so needed his teachings on Jewish history and on Messianic Judaism and all this stuff. I'm just telling you that the Lord has the ability to raise up people that can honor their marriages and honor the flock without us begging for these teachings. Oh, we got to have his teachings. We got to have Dr. No, actually, the fact is that any type of person that would treat his own wife this way and treat the flock this way and go after a younger woman that is in his flock, and then secondly, go after a friend and a married woman that's in his flock sexually, and all these things that he's done, and then lied pervasively, continually through this, we are done. We are done. And Mike, there's so many people that don't want to hear these things yet. that, oh, wait until the Firefly report comes out. Wait until this. Listen, we watched a year's worth of stuff about Mike Bickle, and people told us to shut up about him too. Guess what? We were right. And it's not us. It was the corroborating witnesses like Londa, like in the same situation, like others that saw what happened with Deborah Hebert, and so many through these. It's mirroring situations. We're not dumb. We're not stupid. We don't have to just sit there and go, oh, well, Mike Brown said, guys, I'm not going to comment on this. Wait till the investigation comes out. I'm like, dude, you're 69 years old, and you can say to us today that you did or did not do these things. And don't think that we're so stupid to think that, oh, well, you're just being a dad, kissing her on the cheek, kissing her on the lips, and holding hands with her. None of us do those things, Mike Brown. We don't do those things.
Slapping her on the butt.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that one too. So anyway, there's my rant. You had something to say, Christina.
Well, I was just going to say that a couple of things. First, what you said about her finding those letters, and then she realized whether it was to her, it was a father-daughter, relationship that she knew was a little off.
The letters in the nightstand, right?
Yes, the letters with the other woman. In his nightstand, she found letters to another woman. She knew then, that moment, the reason she left, because then that's when she knew she wasn't the only one. She wasn't the only one. And that's what happened with Mike Bickle, with all of these women. Everybody thinks they're the one. They think they're just their little special only one. But really, they just have a line of them. And as soon as you see that, then you realize, then your eyes open. You're like, okay, actually, yes, this is wrong. Yeah. This is wrong. So I think that happened. And then also there's so many similarities between Mike Bickle and Dr. Michael Brown that it is like freaking me out. It's so creepy. And we just have to recognize these patterns so that whenever you see them in the future and other people, that we can just recognize it and be like, no, it's not just Mike Bickle. No, they don't get to just act like this. Yeah. This is not appropriate. Having those women in that room watching those movies, do you know what Mike Bickle did? He had a Bible study of 18, 19, 20-year-old girls, that's just exactly girls. Right. And he would go to their apartment and watch movies with them and go in and leave. And you know what? He had love notes that were from the spiritual father. That's exactly back right. And forth. And the other thing he did was, and I don't know how this happened with Dr. Michael Brown. I don't know how you can tell another woman not to sleep with their own husband. But Mike Bickle also said that he was celibate, and he told these other people to be celibate. Be celibate. So it's just too weird, and I just can't.
It's like, do they have their own men's Zoom Bible study that they go around and talk about what to do, like how to do this stuff? I wouldn't be surprised if Rick Joyner's a part, if Chris Reed's a part. I would not be there, because Chris Reed's situation is very, very similar to this. And he's getting away scot-free. He's getting away because he's, running Jesus Revolution Church. But I have a inkling.
Odd name, right?
Wait, is it Jesus Revolution Church?
It is Jesus Revolution
Church. Serious?
Yeah. He must have been mentored by Brown, but I have an inkling there's more to come for Chris Reed, and that's not rumor mill. It's just the reality. So, but I'll just say these patterns are eerily similar. You're exactly right, and it's kind of freaky.
With Sarah, because I know you've spoken to her too, but the other thing was Sarah did start having lunch with a young man that was friends with her, and Mike Brown found out, and they were sitting together in church. She said, he wasn't my boyfriend, we were friends. And she said, later, who knows what would have happened, but we were friends. And Mike Brown told her that was wrong, that had an evil appearance, and that she needed to not do that. And then after she found that note, she was like, I'm going to lunch with that guy. I haven't done one thing inappropriate. I'm going to lunch with him. And so then Mike Brown called her into his office again. I thought I told you that you shouldn't be having lunch alone with that guy and sitting with him in chapel, and that it's inappropriate. And she said, well, is what you did to me inappropriate? And that's how she responded to him. Wow. And also I know about the
letter
woman from Brownsville, the letter. And so that is how I believe that saved Sarah.
Yeah.
All of that. And I wanted to say one other thing about the grooming process. When you're talking about something that has become a cult, where people are blindly following a person or people, that whole congregation is being groomed.
Yep.
Yes.
Michael Brown's grooming started way back at BRSM when he wrote that book, and he started grooming the whole school and the faculty and those around him that he also was spiritually abusing. He was grooming them to leave and to have
Wow.
a reason to leave and for him to be the leader. And I feel like in different ways, we were all groomed to have these things in our mind that would make us go, you know what? Yeah, this is what we're going to do. And it was just different levels of grooming for different people. And I think that I want people to become aware of these tactics that men like this use, and it is rampant in this nation. And we're seeing it revealed in some of these larger churches, but it's just as bad in a lot of smaller churches too.
Yeah.
And I want people to wake up to what's happening. The church needs a reformation. We need a move of God, and we need for people to wake up and put your foot down and not allow these things to continue, not just the sexual things, but the controlling, manipulative things that cause us to set our eyes on a person and follow a person and think that we cannot hear God for ourselves. Like that is something that has to stop. We have got to get rid of the celebrity mentality that we have towards men of God. It's setting them up for failure as well as ourselves. And I want to call Michael Brown and these men. Do you want to see a real move of God? Come forward and truly repent. Truly mean it. Come clean. There will be a move of God if that happens.
Yeah, that in itself would be a move of God. um, and to be frank, God is moving, and this is it's not what we all thought it would be in the charismatic movement, but it is a move of exposure, and it is I was telling Christina earlier today, everybody wants a prophet, but the real prophets that you see in the Old Testament, I mean, frankly, what these guys were doing, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of foretelling happening, but the majority of it was calling leaders, spiritual leaders, to account. It was just like very simple, like stop doing this and start following the commandments, you know, like.
And I think we have to wake up and realize that Jesus with the whip is just as loving as Jesus on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same person. It's the same love.
It's good.
He was willing to die for those people that when he went in there and overturned the money changers, he knew he was going to die for those people.
Mm-hmm.
So the whip has just as much love in it. And then what happens? A whip gets dragged across his back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just as loving. It's the same Jesus. It's the same love. It's the same. He disciplines those he loves. And so I want us to start to embrace that part of Jesus. And that if we're going to do the same things as Jesus, it's going to involve these types of things. It's time, and we cannot allow this to just go on and on and on. And God's not going to allow it. So, I want to encourage you guys and everyone else that is questioning if they should speak up or not. Please go to the Firefly website and fill out that survey. If you have had any kind of abuse done to you by Michael Brown, I know that it says sexual abuse, but please fill it out anyways. And I think it's so important. I'm just begging you, if there's anything that from any time period that he has done inappropriately anything to you, please go to the Firefly website and fill out that survey. It's so important.
Yeah, that's so good, Londa. And I want to say one more thing, and then I want to let you kind of say any final thoughts you have. But the grooming process and speaking up and all these things, it really sheds so much light, on things that people are currently going through or have gone through. Because as you're listening to this podcast today, you could be going, oh my gosh, whether it's Michael Brown or whether it's a small church situation, you go, oh my gosh, that's happening to me right now. We had someone reach out to us after the Firefly report, after the IHOP Firefly report that reached out to us and said, hey, when I was there, this leader did this thing to me, and this was the process happening. Do you see anything in this? And we said, yeah, it's the exact same process that Bickle was having with other women. And so, point being, it's good to hear these stories because it can snap people out of those moments so they can turn and run immediately. But also, I'll say, just like with the women that did speak up and it gave the other women courage at IHOP, if there are any other women that have experienced what Ray's wife did, or what Sarah did in the fathering, the spiritual fathering thing, please. And there's not like the crowd out there, anybody that says, oh, they're trying to gain something. What is there? There's literally so much that is at stake for women when they do speak up. It's tough. Mm-hmm. It's very tough. And we get that. So you can come forward anonymously. There's ways to do that. But I think the Firefly report would be great, or they can, they can reach out to Julie Royce. Like, that's one way to have that initial conversation.
You can reach out to me. You can reach out to me even.
Sure. So Christina, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I just want to say that part of the reason why we're doing this, because I know a lot of people still don't get it. People are still like, well, why can't you just wait till the investigation's over and then we'll all know? Well, we don't know what the scope of the investigation to, like you said, spiritual abuse, is that going to be included? We don't know. And we also don't know what the fire board is going to do once they have the results of the investigation, if they are going to fully release everything and make it known to the public. And either way, we want to give a voice to, or amplify the voice of, victims and whistleblowers. But we also want to just notice these patterns so that we can recognize them in our own lives and teach our children, and so that they don't fall into this. And also, these specific pastors and leaders, people need to know what they've done, because I am so sick. I'm sickened by all of it. But hearing that he brought 4 18, 19, 20-year-old girls into his hotel room and showed them nudity, I'm just if my daughter, we're all moms now, we're moms now. Yeah. If my daughter goes to ministry school and the leader is going to bring her into his hotel room and show her that, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. And I'm going to make sure nobody else does either, because you're not a safe person. And everyone needs to know that. And husbands need to know, if they're going to follow Dr. Michael Brown, they need to know that he told one of his friends' wives not to sleep with their own husband. Is that who you want to be your leader? Is that who you want your wife and your children following and listening to? Not me. I don't want anything to do with it. And I think us, because these leaders have not been open and honest about what they've done, and nobody has held them accountable and made it available for us to make informed decisions about where we're going to go to church and school and who we're going to listen to. We don't know who we're listening to. So we have to because our audience is just people. They're just people just like us. And I want to know. Right. I want to know when I go to church. I want to know if we, our kids go to a school. I want to know what you've done and what kind of person you are. And it's not fair. It's not right not to know.
And there's not, we're talking about this today, but there's no, these apostolic councils, these groups, these people that kind of put together these things to do this stuff and to make decisions. It's it doesn't even work. You look back at the quote tribunal with Todd Bentley in 2019. Well, the guy's still back in ministry. So they were don't go back. Guess who told him not to go back? Guess who told him not to go back? Guess who was a part of that tribunal? Mike Brown. So here's the point is none of us are decision makers in all these things, but I will tell you that it is the power of the press, and having a Christian press in some way, believers to speak into these things with some insight can be very, very helpful. So no, we don't get to make the call. We don't get to make the decision, but what we do get to do is have full 1000% transparency. That's what we get. That's what the body of Christ deserves. Paul the apostle said, follow me as I follow follow Christ. Paul the Apostle said in Acts 20, you saw the way I lived among you. Guess what, Mike Brown? She saw the way that you lived among her. Londa did, and she gets to talk about it. So Sarah saw the way you lived among her, and she gets to talk about it. And no, it's not gossip. Ray saw the way you lived among him, and he gets to talk about it. The same way Jude talked about false teachers, it's not just because you maybe said something doctrinally wrong. It's your life, Brown, and your doctrine. It's your life and your doctrine, according to 1 Timothy chapter 4. Your life and your doctrine are what holds you to account as a right teacher or a false teacher. And right now we're saying you should not be teaching the body of Christ anymore. You're 69, almost 70. We bless you to go and figure out life in a different way. Yeah. Or at the very least, if you're going to keep doing this, let everyone know that this is the history of this man, and he has yet to actually open up and be accountable to this history, which is not full repentance. So may God have mercy on your soul. May God have mercy on your life. May God have mercy on your marriage. And I mean that sincerely. With that, we're coming up to an hour and a half, but Londa, thank you so much for speaking up. Thank you for talking to us. We really, really appreciate you. Guys, let us know your comments below. Share this video, like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video to get it more traction, and let Londa know your thoughts below as well. And let's call Brown to repent. Why should he wait till the end of the investigation? Why should he not stand up on his own platform today and tell the full truth and nothing but the truth? So help him, God.
The investigation could stop just like that.
Yes.
If we did that,
it would be over. All right. God bless you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next time with another one. And take care, Londa. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.